I am Jim Collison and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Called the Coach, recorded on March 9th, 2018. Called the Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you do have questions during this live webcast, we have a chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. If you just pop down there, bottom left-hand corner, says login. Choose login. You don't have to create an account. Just choose the guest account. Put your name in where it says guest. Take those numbers out of there. We don't want to see those, but put your name in where it says guest and then hit submit, and you'll be in the chat room. We will be taking live questions from you today, and we appreciate anything that you drop in there, comments as well. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions, you can contact us as well. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or use the contact form right there on the live page. And of course, don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. For all your CliftonStrengths coaching resources and training needs, you can also catch the video and both streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening. We call that podcasting. That's available for you. There's a podcast app on the iPhone, and there are apps on Android that allow you to download podcasts. If you haven't caught on to it yet, it's a great way to do all that professional development that you need to do while you're in the car, on a train, or in a plane. It's available off of our coach's blog. Head out to coaching.gallup.com. Dr. Julie Wechsler began her career with IBM and has more than 20 years of experience in helping people and organizations they work in achieve their goals. She's coached leaders at all levels and worked in a variety of organizations ranging from local family-owned businesses to global technology corporations. IBM would tip that off right away. Julie, great to have you on Call to Coach, and welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Well, it's really good to be here. I appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, you bet. Let's get to know you a little bit as we dive in. Nobody introduces themselves. I always say this: nobody introduces themselves as well as they themselves, right? Do so. Give us some career highlights. Just kind of walk through a little bit of your career for me, and tell me what you've done and hit the highlights.
Sure. Well, I did start working at IBM in Phoenix, selling large-scale computer systems. That was a fun time, Jim, because the computers were kept in air-conditioned rooms. The cables were under the floor, under the pretend flooring.
Yeah, they had vented floors, right, to be able to keep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another interesting thing about that is there weren't a lot of women selling large computer systems. So it was a great time. I learned some really important things, two that come to mind. I learned that the way to really help is to find out what's keeping the customer up at night. And the second thing I learned is that the magic, no matter how good the technology, is always in the people. And I've taken those two pieces of information with me along my long and winding journey. So I'm always grateful for my IBM experience.
Julie, I think our roads might have crossed a little bit in the sense that I think you were in the IBM facility in Tucson there. Is that right?
Here in Phoenix.
In Phoenix. So my dad was an IBMer as well. So for 35 years, he worked at IBM, Santa Teresa location in the Bay Area. So South San Jose, big facility there. He at one point thought we might move to Arizona. So we would have been coming your way a little bit. But like Maureen Monty, the three of us have a big background in IBM and Big Blue. They may not be the technology company that they once were, but certainly they're a factor there and some important lessons to learn. How did you transition? So you spent a bunch of time in the community college space. So how did you transition from there to the community college?
Well, I actually took about 10 years off from working outside of the home and had a little clan of kids. I have 4 children. And after about 10 years of that, they were all in school and it was time for me to go back to work. So I actually went to one of the local community colleges, took a class in career reentry for women. And one of the things that kept coming up for me was training and education. So I was very fortunate to be hired by a company that was doing some human effectiveness training out of Seattle at the time. And I started doing that, fell in love with consulting and working in organizations. And spent 4 or 5 years doing that pretty extensively here in the Phoenix area. As a lifelong learner, Jim, I started getting a little restless and I wanted to learn more. So I went back to school at ASU, go Sun Devils. And got a master's degree in communication. And that really sort of jump-started the second part of my career. I loved being in school. I loved being around students and the academics. And I set a new goal, which was to work in higher education. So went back to school again, pursued this doctoral degree in educational leadership, began working at the Maricopa Community Colleges here in Phoenix, and first in employee and organizational development doing training, and then worked at one of the colleges for 9 years. And that was the beginning of really my strengths experience. I was very fortunate in that the president of the college described herself as a strengths-based leader, Dr. Sherry Olson, and she is indeed. And she came in new to Phoenix, new to the college, and said, we're turning things around. And over the next few years, we did just that. We really worked hard on building a culture of strengths. We started with faculty and staff. Once people who worked at the college were aware and on board, we started working with the students. Of course, we had the college success course was a great entree, but strengths at the college is also embedded in career services, advisement. One time I even worked with the boys basketball team to do a strengths workshop. So that was a really great time for me. I spent a lot of time with Gallup and learning, and it was just delightful seeing, really the impact on students.
Can you talk a little bit about, I introduced you as a doctor. You talked about, the desire to go back and get the master's program. Why go back? And you're in education. This is probably a no-brainer question, but why go back for the PhD?
Well, I would say input and learner is probably the real answer. And I love learning. I want to know. I like to be able to really justify what I'm talking about. And education is important if you're working in that field. People sort of expect that if that's what you're doing, you'll have those degrees. So,
yeah, how long did that take? I mean, that's going that late in life, and it's a lot of work. How long did that take?
Well, my doctoral degree took 5 years, and it took me 3 years with the master's degree because I was working part-time and I had kids at home. But I loved it. It was really, really a great time. I was I was the age of many of these kids' parents when I was going to school. But I was wiser in some ways, so it all worked out.
Yeah, no, and every life experience, is kind of that opportunity to learn. It kind of, puts you in some different places, kind of as well. I want to talk a little bit about for you. We don't do this often enough on Call to Coach, but everybody loves kind of the shout out of where they did their certified training and who they trained with. So where did you do that, and who were your trainers?
I'm so glad you asked me that because it makes me warm just to think about it again. So I did my training in beautiful Omaha at the Riverfront campus, and my trainers were Al Weinsfeld and Kurt Liesfeld. Weinsman. Sorry, Al.
Al Winsman. Yep.
Winsman, thank you.
Yeah.
And Kurt. So I had just a tremendous experience. Loved being in Omaha. Go back anytime I can find a reason to. And just really, that was the icing on the cake in terms of my commitment to working with strengths.
Yeah, it's one of those situations, when we think about the training sessions folks go to, where I think probably for you too, as you met some folks, the cohorts get pretty tight. Mm-hmm. Were there some folks you're still in communication with that came out of your cohort?
Absolutely. One I'll call out, Mike Daphne in Los Angeles or Southern California. Yeah, and every once in a while when I need something big, I reach out to Mike. Great guy.
Yeah, he is indeed. He's been on before as well.
Right. Yeah. And last year at the summit, I ran into 2 people that I had known from my cohort. So great times. Yeah, I think that's just truly a life-changing experience.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about. I want to dive. You mentioned you worked in the community college, and I get a lot of questions on the Facebook page from time to time of how do I do that, and how does that work? And if you were thinking about someone, can you just be a coach and start helping in that area? Do I have to get a PhD to be able to be a coach in that space? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? You were in that space for a while.
Yeah,
And
9
so
years.
how would
9
you
years.
talk to someone out there who's kind of thinking of working in that education space?
Mhm. Yeah, I've had people ask me that before. I think it's an important question. Um, well, if you want to be a faculty member or an instructor at that level, probably going to need a master's degree. And so that's a beginning. That's sort of the entree. However, there are opportunities to work, as a volunteer coach, maybe to get in with the student services department and do some pro bono work just to kind of get yourself established. I think that's a great way to, maybe get your foot in the door. If you can find someone at the college who knows something about strengths, or connect with someone and start talking about the amazing things that we find strengths development can do for students. There can be lots of ways to join in, at least on a volunteer basis initially. And I know at the college where I was, when we first started teaching the success course, you didn't have to have a master's degree. You could, if you worked at the college and you were interested in doing it. So all kinds of opportunities. I met someone recently who's doing something here in the Phoenix area I love, and she's working with high school students to help them kind of get clear about where they might want to go to school and what kinds of career interests they might have. And I think that's brilliant because, the parents of those young people are really heavily invested in their kids making the right decisions. So I think that's a great niche to get into. Is I've also thought of this myself is, tutoring companies, people who are paying for tutoring. If you could get some connections there, that might be a great way to find some clients.
Yeah, we actually have a high school internship program for technology students here at Gallup that I get a chance to lead, and it's just a ton of fun. We do a lot of strengths training, education, insight for them in the program because we know at that level we're trying to set a baseline kind of foundation for them,
Right,
right?
right.
And it just gives us a great opportunity to have that influence at the high school level. You mentioned something interesting in that, and I kind of threw it to the college level, and you said, well, but you can do other things, and you kind of have a message it's kind of interesting in the sense that you know we can't always do exactly what we want to do in the way we want to do it now in the things that we're doing, right? And I get a lot of coaches who are like, I want to do this kind of coaching, but I'm not there yet. What kind of advice, like what would you give for someone who maybe just starting or they've been in a while, they want to make a career transition? What kind of advice would you give? Let's talk a little bit about that. In like, hey, it's the opportunity's not there right now. So what's next? What would you say?
Hmm. Well, so I lead with strategic, and I'm always thinking about what's next. So I think that's a great place to start. Is really imagining, where you want to be. I love an appreciative inquiry approach. I love asking myself, imagine it's and I do ask myself this sometimes, but I also ask clients this. Imagine it's a year from now and things are going exactly how you want them. What's really going on? And get very, very clear about that. And then start imagining some baby steps. How could I perhaps offer something free, or maybe join in on something that's also already happening so I could get some experience? Getting really intentional about where you want to go and maybe some ways of getting there that you hadn't thought about. In addition to that, Jim, there's always the sometimes you just end up somewhere where you didn't expect, and voila, there's another opportunity. So, I was going along pretty well in my strategic maximizer life. I'm thinking I had everything planned out and under control, and I've got a fair dose of discipline in my top five. So, and then one day in the fall of October, October specifically, 2015, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that was not in my plan. I'll tell you that. Had not been looking at that whatsoever. So this is, kind of it's a very personal story. I hope it's all right to share it.
Yeah,
But
no, it's great. Keep going.
so I sat there in the oncologist's office on the day of my first infusion. And, there's a lot of things that go through your mind. Terror is probably at the top of the list when you're facing something serious like that. But I saw these posters on the walls, and they were pictures of women and with little sayings. And one of the sayings said, there was one woman who helped to lift up the others. And I thought, that's me. That's how I'm going to get through this. So I kind of fired up my relator gym, and I decided that I was going to be the person who connected with others, who tried to encourage them, who got to know the nurses, everyone. So one, it distracted me from what I was going through, but two, it really gave me an opportunity to use what I had learned about the importance of strengths. And I began kind of making a connection between strengths and well-being. I started to think, really, that's what we're here for. We're hoping that we're going to get well. And I started to see, gosh, if people knew what their natural talents were, if they could really get in touch with how they best get things done and how they can approach this in a way that's natural for them and empowering, that would be great. So since that time, oh, by the way, I'm healthy now.
That's good. Congratulations on that. Yeah, for sure.
But I never thought that would happen. But I really tried to make the best of it, and I came out of that with my company, Wellbeing Essentials, and my focus is on helping people who've been through something big, whether it's a change, something they weren't expecting, maybe something natural like retirement or the empty nest syndrome. But people who are looking at, here's an opportunity for me to start again. And what do I really want to do? How can I use my strengths to thrive? And that has just been incredibly empowering. I just finished I called it 4 weeks in February to Flourish. And it was a class for breast cancer survivors at one of the local colleges. And they were very kind. We held it in the Fitness and Wellness Center. And these women were absolutely heroes to me. They're on fire. Two of them are now walking together regularly. One has started selling pre-made meals to people who are in cancer treatment because she loves cooking and wanted to make some extra money. I mean, it's just been really exciting to see what they can do. So I guess my message is, whether you're at IBM or you're at the Chamber of Commerce meeting or, you're talking to a student or someone at your church, go deep, think about what you really care about, be authentic, and share what you know, because there's so much goodness in the work we do, and people everywhere really can benefit from it.
Yeah, no, it's a great story. We tell coaches all the time to niche down, niche into their space. And what I think is interesting about what you're saying is that I think sometimes and you mentioned you're strategic and futuristic and kind of having a plan, right? Discipline, having this plan, and then life throws a curve in there. And I think it would be easy to say, well, that's not what I had planned. Like you weren't going to focus on wellness in what you were doing. You were having a successful career. We're going to talk here in the second half of the program. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about your education work and some of the things that you did, but we wanted to also spend some time thinking about well-being. You weren't necessarily planning on that, but that opportunity kind of arose, right? Exactly. And you were in the midst of it. And I think oftentimes that's a really successful place to start. I love technology, and I had found when I started working with high school kids in technology, I spoke their language. Right, it was a really important part. How do you measure? So, as you're beginning this new well-being work, as you're working with people in strengths coaching, in that, typically we measure success in coaching through performance metrics, like am I making more money or am I being more successful? Right. What kind of things do you guys look at in this area to know you're being successful, to know you're investing in those talents to become strengths? How are you guys measuring that?
Well, I actually developed a little pre-post test assessment and asked my participants to complete it about 5 main factors, but the ones that are specifically related to strengths are, I know what my talents are. I know where my power comes from. So how did you feel at the beginning of the 4 weeks, and how do you feel now? And people reported a pretty significant change in as a result of the strengths work, being able to articulate, who they are and what they're when they're at their best. So that was huge. That was really pleasing to me. The second thing is that people reported a pretty big improvement in, I feel empowered to make a difference in my life. So isn't that what we're looking for? These folks went from, in some cases, not really knowing how to move forward. What happens? Treatment's over, and there you are. You're on your own, and people don't know what to do. So this really gave folks a way to say, okay, that's behind me. Now, who am I going forward? What have I got? How am I going to use it? And then the well-being piece is, where am I in those 5 areas? And again, where do I want to be? Where do I see myself a year from now? And then the idea of, okay, I'm going to use my strengths to create these action plans to get me from where I am to where I want to be. It's really exciting. So, we can talk about that in a technical way and say strength self-efficacy improved as a result of the experience that people had.
Yeah, no, encouraging for me to hear from you. Like, sometimes we go into this work thinking, especially when it has to do with someone's health or the well-being concepts, right? Even financial, that we don't have to measure those personal things. Like, oh no, we don't have to measure them. I love those questions that you're asking them, because it kind of gets to the heart of, how did you feel before we started? How are you feeling now? And those are questions you can continue to ask, I would imagine, through the coaching. Do you ask those on a continual basis?
Oh, absolutely. What are your goals? What do you think is the time frame to reach them? Which of your talents are you going to use to get there? And I ask people, tell me how you will measure your success. I don't make that up for them, but I want to know, what would it look like to you if you had improved your physical well-being? What would you be doing? And really spend time with them thinking about that, so that they have a solid vision in their mind, that they can really imagine it. And then we come back and use what they said to evaluate their progress. And that's also a good way to sell coaching, right? Now I can talk about that. So 80% of my participants said they felt more empowered to make a significant change in their well-being. That helps us move our business forward. And
Yeah,
it's the right thing for the client, right?
right, right. No, right. But you mentioned some important key points. I know our volumes are a little different between me and you. Julie, I'm going to have you see if we can have you speak a little bit louder. I think it's the Google Hangout, but I don't want to stop. So let's just keep going here. What we have with it, but
Okay.
Julie, a lot of folks, when we get into this idea of well-being, or when we get in this idea of, even on the on the religious side, on the faith side, that we start doing this coaching work, and then all of a sudden it has to be a nonprofit. It has to be something we just do. How have you worked that, or how are you working that from a business perspective? Because I think there's a lot of coaches that think, well, oh man, I don't want to charge for this, and I'm not looking for the specifics of how you charge, but how have you approached, because it is important that you make a living off of this. How have you approached that from your side and charging for it?
Right. Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I will share with you what I'm doing and what seems to be not only working well, but feels good to me. And I'm trying to speak up, Jim. Is that a little better?
Yeah, I think so. I'm getting some feedback from the chat room, but I think we're okay. Keep going.
Okay. So I did feel like it wouldn't be very kind or compassionate of me to charge breast cancer survivors, right? So I really get where you're looking. And I do still struggle with that. But what I have found, because I did these workshops for free, is that the people who came out of that experience on fire and want more are more interested in being willing to pay, right? So my own preference is to give away something up front that has value. And then for people who want to continue the support, that's when the pay fits in. I've also begun to realize I love working with people and making a difference in their lives around their well-being. And I think I'm going to do this, just modify my approach a little bit and offer it for other groups of people. So people who maybe are not suffering, but are retiring or are wanting to make a change, people who you feel more comfortable charging. I think that's what I've learned from doing this. And the other thing I do is I'm continually open for other opportunities. I just got a wonderful referral from one of the other Gallup coaches here in Phoenix, and I'm going to be doing some work coming soon that's lovely, exciting, and well-paying. So, you don't have to be stuck, but there's something in terms of community well-being. There's something really good about being able to either give something away or do it at a very reasonable cost.
Do you find, have you, in that space, sometimes the scale is at big groups? In other words, coming in and speaking on behalf of an organization in that kind of space where those organizations can pay, but maybe the individuals coming can't. Have you seen any of those kinds of opportunities come your way as you've been working in that space?
Honestly, I think I'm a little bit too new at this to tell you definitively, but I think what's going to happen based on my experience is key contact point, if you want to work with people in the medical, in treatment of some sort, is the physicians, the nurse practitioners, or the support groups. I went last Saturday to a breast cancer resource expo fair, and I think I met almost everyone in the metropolitan area who's working with breast cancer survivors. And Jim, what I found out, none of them are working around strengths or helping people rebuild their lives in terms of that personal development. No one's talking about well-being beyond maybe diet and exercise. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and there are lots of ways in. There are lots of support groups and providers in that area.
Yeah. And I think originally you reached out to me about our well-being book. Was that how we started the conversation, right?
Yes.
I think maybe some of Gallup's best kept secrets are buried in our well-being work, which we spent a lot of time putting together, and actually we're reworking it and will be relaunched at some point. So we have some things coming on that. But we mentioned the 5 areas of well-being in that book, and if people want to spend some more time thinking about it. But Julie, I think your approach was like, why are we not talking more about strengths in relation to well-being at the summit? You sat in on Tom Madsen's right at the end of the summit. What did you take away from that? I mean, why was that? Because Tom's message has been very well-being focused. In fact, we had Tom on Called to Coach, I want to say maybe a year ago. If you go back to the YouTube page and search Called to Coach Tom Madsen, you'll see him there, and you can listen to that. But Julie, how did that impress you, and what did you take away from that when because he's had his health problem? It's just not women who suffer from
Right?
right? Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And so many people that I've come to know from Gallup have also had health problems. So this is not the only way. Well, Tom Madsen is, I just think, a really special and pretty heroic guy in that he does share his journey and has written some great books about his own personal journey. What I really love about Tom's approach now that he's working with students is his focus on engagement and well-being, because that's really what we want for our students, but it's also what we want in our own lives, right? We want to be engaged in our own lives. We want to feel excited and committed and have meaning in what we're doing, and that's engagement. And what we really want is to thrive. No one wants to just be surviving, right? So Tom's message is that's the why, and strength is really the how we get there. And so I sat in that session with Tom at the summit last year, and I think it was 3 or 4 hours, but if you've ever been in a Tom Madsen session, that it felt like 45 minutes and I didn't want it to end. He was very entertaining. But that's what I heard loud and clear is strengths is the how, and well-being and engagement are the why. And I think that makes sense. And I think that as coaches, that's a good way to message what we do and to talk about what we do, because that resonates with pretty much everyone.
Yeah, hard to invest. We have that equation, right? And it's hard to invest in our talents when illness, when what the well-being aspects of it, things actually that we have in our control. Sometimes we don't, but when we do, so it's hard to invest in those things, right? When we're not feeling well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, let's talk a little bit about. I teased this out. Well, first of all, before I transition into the education work, anything else you want to say on the work that you're doing on well-being? Anything that I missed there? Anything else you want to say?
I just would leave, I guess, that conversation with, if you were at the summit last year and you heard Tom Rath speak, that was pretty moving in itself. But the last few things that he said have really stuck with me, and I think, I would share this or lift this up for our coaches. Um, my words, not exactly his, but basically the message was, if you want to make a change, if you want to do something, if you're ready to branch out, do it now. Do it now. And Tom went on to say, because if you say you'll do it later, you probably won't. And that has stuck with me since July of 2017. And so I've just really tried to dial up Activator and say, let's get going. So thank you, Tom Rath.
Yeah, no, it was a moving. We've gotten many requests for that video, and we can't release it, but you summarized it well. I think is in a lot of ways, get moving and get moving now. We don't know how many days that we have. We don't know when things are going to strike us in those kinds of ways, and so I think the opportunities in to tie this to your message early in this conversation is uh, coach, work, encourage where you are today, right? To be able to do that right now in what you're doing. No opportunity, let no opportunity sit untaken. So I do want to transition a little bit to your education work because I think like it's super valuable in what you're doing at the community college level when you were working in that. What kind of things can you just kind of walk me through a little bit of what kind of programs did you do and what did you find helpful when working with the students, when working with the staff? What was the best of what you guys did?
Sure. Well, just before I start, I want to briefly describe the college. South Mountain Community College is in an urban area of Phoenix. It is about 70% first generation college students, meaning no one in their family has gone to college before. And it is federally designated as minority and Hispanic serving institution. So the kids who come to South Mountain, oh, and in many cases, they're not kids. A lot of reentry adults, people my age, trying to come back to school. And it's an opportunity to make a difference in a way that I had never imagined until the work began. But I think some of the things that were most significant early on was just creating an awareness of strengths. We painted the front of the Student Services building with beautiful strengths graphics and the names of talent themes. And people knew as soon as they walked onto campus that this was a strengths-based institution. And we branded the college as a strengths-based college and even used that branding as competitive leverage, if you will. There are 10 community colleges here in Phoenix, and they compete for students. So creating this idea that there's something beautifully unique and special where your students are going to have an experience unlike that at any other college, I think was part of the beginning. So that was huge. Our first 2 years, we focused on staff and faculty. We had all employees were invited to participate in an 8-hour educator session that someone who's become a Gallup-Certified coach now, but has worked in education and in the Maricopa Community Colleges for a long time, buddy of mine, Scott Geddes. Hey, Scott. Taught those courses and still does teach courses at South Mountain for employees. But so that became part of being part of the community, is learning about it. Still today, learning about your strengths is part of our onboarding experience at the college. And notice I still say our, although I've been retired for a year and a half. But
hard to let it go, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. When
So
you,
creating the culture, bringing the faculty and staff on board, and then reaching out to the students. And initially through this student success course, that's mandatory for degree or transfer seeking students. So it was available for many students who came to campus. Um, Also embedding it in, like I mentioned earlier, advising, career services. We have at South Mountain, I think there are now 4 or 5 certified strengths coaches, most of them from Gallup. And that's been just a great way to support the movement. So it's alive and it's everywhere. And they're doing a great job of collecting data on the outcomes of this work. So
Marta had said in the chat room, oh, she'd love to see a picture of the strength space painted wall. Is that posted on the site anywhere? Do you know? And if folks wanted to see what's going on at the school, how would they? Do you guys have a site that they could go to?
well, they certainly can look on the website. It's southmountaincc.edu. And I don't know for sure whether there's a picture of that building, but if that's important, I will go and take one and share it.
Yeah, people love to get those kinds of practical tips.
Sure,
How
sure.
how did that get so embedded in the organization? I mean, you mentioned it sounds like it was embedded from the top to the bottom and all the way through. What was the magic of that, do you think? How did that? It just doesn't happen by accident.
Right, right. And I will say there was some resistance along the way, particularly with a new leader coming in, and she had this agenda. And higher ed is a very collaborative culture. So someone coming in from the top down with a big idea sometimes is going to meet some resistance. But she was very clever and very determined. So she started with her executive team. They all found out about their strengths. She shared the talent map. She started meetings with conversations about how did you use your strengths since the last time we were together. Um, every once in a while, there would be a top 5 sign-in sheet, just constantly talking about strengths. Once those top 5 or 6 leaders had it, they were encouraged to take it to their teams. So it started going down through the organization. So now we had the vice president of student development, the vice president of academic affairs, people at the next level working on it with their teams. And until pretty soon it really was a movement. People started wearing strength shirts, having their top 5 on their sleeve. At some point it took over. The energy was, the momentum just went on its own. And you couldn't stop it now at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of self-perpetuating, right? It just kind
Yeah,
of keeps rolling.
absolutely. People use their top 5 in their email signatures. It's a big part of the college actually adopted as one of their 5 organizational values, well-being. And they talk about strengths and well-being when students come on campus. They talk about it every year at convocation. So it's constantly reinforced.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to hear. It does sound like, though, I mean, it does oftentimes take a buy-in from senior leadership to, it kind of needs to be both bottom up and top down driven.
Mm-hmm.
What if someone's in a situation where they're not getting that institutional buy-in at the very top? What kind of advice would you give them?
Sure. And I was really fortunate because that was almost an ideal situation. I think if you can find a champion somewhere, even if it's not a leader, if maybe talking to people in counseling is a great place. If you can get to some of the faculty who are teaching the counseling classes, or people in the student development area, advisement, those are the folks who really are thinking about the engagement and the well-being of students. Career services is a great place where students are used to taking some assessments and are motivated to want to learn more about themselves. So if it's not top down, if you can find a way into one of those environments and do your homework so you can talk about how this work in higher education helps students. I
Well,
think that's another way in.
yeah, I think it's good advice. I think oftentimes we need to be just very creative. Again, going back to what you started with is that you kind of have to work with what you've been given and be faithful with a little, right? Those who are faithful with a little will be given more. And I think that's the principle that works in a lot of different scenarios. And so, right, being kind of faithful to what you have and working with the folks that you have and having some measurements with the people that you have, right? We
Yes.
talked about that as well. So I
Yes.
think all those things are super important. And then you said you got lucky. And I think sometimes, right, we fall into those situations where, I would not be doing a strengths-based podcast called to Coach if 10 years ago I hadn't gotten very, very fortunate to fall into my role here at Gallup.
Mhm.
And so then sometimes you just have to take advantage of what you've fallen into, right? From that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, I will say I used my strategic when before this president was at the campus, we weren't working on strengths. And I was actually in a different role working with students through academic support programs. But I heard as part of the hiring process that our new president was a strengths-based leader. And I fired up, used my strategic to get to know her. I communicated with her in advance of her being on campus. I let her know how interested I was in supporting her work, and ended up shortly thereafter actually reporting directly to her with some oversight responsibility of this movement. So you go for what you want. You got to get out there and go for it.
Indeed. We're going to take you through the new lightning round, a new segment. Not kidding, not really, but new segment here on Call the Coach. No, you had in the notes you gave me, you had some lessons learned as a coach, as a Gallup-certified coach. You had written down for me, there were some things you had learned. I think we should probably finish every Call the Coach with this because I think it's really, really important. But walk me through that list a little bit. What kind of things have you learned on this journey?
Oh, Jim, I love that. You know what? I don't have that list right in front of me. Can you
Yeah.
help me out here?
Let me, so as we think about, hold on, let me bring that back up. I was going to anticipate you jumping right into it. So first of all, he says there's great potential to add value through your knowledge of strengths wherever you are. We kind of talked about that, and then find your passion and use it in what you know. You've probably done that several times, right? Just in kind of thinking about maybe two different. We talked about the work, the health work that you've done, as well as the college work that you've done. Would you add anything else to that? Are there any other secret areas where you're doing
Hmm.
coaching with what you know?
Well, that's an interesting question. Secret areas. I work on my kids all the time. So my husband Fred and I have 6 young adult children, and I love coaching them. And I talk to them all the time about their strengths and what it means. One of my daughters is a first grade teacher, and I've got her doing some strength spotting with these 6-year-olds. So I am constantly looking for places where this makes sense. And I'm also always looking for places to help or to learn. So I have a colleague here in town who's doing a lot of work in charter schools around strength spotting, and she's developed some curriculum for teachers to help them know what to look for and to help them talk to the parents of these kids. So I'm just curious, and I'm always looking, and I like to connect people. So I think it's not a secret, but that's a great place to kind of round out what you're doing or look for ways to contribute. Yeah.
I think in practice, like your children, your own children, whether they're small, medium, or large,
Right.
they are. I have adult children at this point, and they are fantastic places to work with and experiment on and try new things with. And
Absolutely.
I really enjoy that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. My youngest daughter, has really gotten into strengths in the last year
Mm.
or so. She's 19 and making her friends take it and beginning to talk about it. And we have conversations when I go
Mm.
pick her up from school. We talk about. She's almost talking about it more than I am. And she said to me, "Dad, when does Theme Thursday start? I want to listen live." So
Yeah.
which is kind of crazy to think my own daughter would want to listen to a Theme Thursday, right? But don't be shocked or don't miss that opportunity in your own family, right?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great place to practice and to help.
You also said in your notes, Gallup has almost unlimited resources to support you. Know where they are and take advantage of them. What are your favorite ones? We mentioned Theme
Oh,
Thursday. That's my favorite too. But what are your favorites?
well, one of the things that has been very helpful to me is this series of learning sessions that happen, because that's just a great way. Just sign up, even if you can't be on when the call is actually held, you can get the materials. Lots of new things keep happening, and that's a great way to stay current. The last session was a list of resources. These are all the things we have available. So I find, Jim, sometimes it's like there's so much going on at Gallup for us coaches that it's hard to keep track. And I think that's why people reach out to you so often, Jim. We were talking before the call started a little bit about all the emails he gets. You know, I'm guilty. I don't know what else to do. I email Jim. But
I get a few. I do get a few.
yeah. But you know, calling, connecting, asking for help when you need it, but looking at Theme Thursday, looking at Call to Coach, looking at the resources online. Yeah, it's all good stuff. And by the way, I forgot to mention the well-being book. Sorry, I'm going back a little bit, but if you haven't read Gallup's book on well-being, pick it up. It's a great study. You will know everything you need to know to get started, and to go off and have meaningful conversations with people about it. So available on the website.
Yeah, available on Amazon as well as shop.gallup.com. I'll remind folks for our resources, coaching.gallup.com. We say that on this show 100,000 times. I've said it. I will say it for the rest of my life. I'll never forget that, coaching.gallup.com. And of course, all the webcasts. A lot of people say, man, you create so many, it's hard to keep up. And I go, yes, that's actually my goal. I never want you to be undereducated. And there are folks that consume it all. And so we encourage you to take that. So I appreciate you saying that. Last question that we'll kind of leave you with here is, you say connect with other coaches in your community. And you alluded to this a second ago, but how important has it been for you to have kind of a local meetup group? And how has it been beneficial for you?
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit shy about saying this, as we've just started, and I've been certified since 2014. So a little bit slow on the draw, but there are 8 of us now who met. Gallup recently did a briefing here in town for potential clients, and there were a few of us coaches there. Someone got the idea to convene a group and invited 7 or 8 of us to come, and we're just on fire. The name of our group is, Aim to Impact. So the Arizona Impact Mastermind, Arizona Impact Through Strengths Mastermind Group. There we go. See, we really are under development. But we've met twice, and you know, we started out, I think, thinking we have little in common. We're all working in different areas. What could this possibly be, or how could it help? But I'll tell you, the social connection, the sense of shared purpose, the opportunity to be with other people who speak the same language, even if we never do anything together, is huge. So we're starting on a trial basis. We said, let's do this for 90 days and make sure it has value. I can't imagine anyone stopping. But I would really recommend that reach out and find the other people in your community. I actually got a lovely referral for some work next week that I'm going to be doing from one of these coaches. So it's a great way to, you know, get some social well-being, stay connected, learn from each other, and you never know, you might get some business.
A lot of coaches ask me, so how do I get one of these meetups started? And it's a lot easier than you think. You just find people locally and you get together. It's not difficult. In a mastermind setup, I think where you guys are headed, it's more of a, you know, sometimes there's 2 different kinds of meetups. There are those meetups where there's presentations and, you know, opportunities for big groups to come. And then it sounds like you've started a mastermind, which is kind of maybe a smaller group where you hope to meet on a more intimate basis and share best practices. Is that kind of what you're thinking for your mastermind?
I think that's where we're starting, but certainly not limiting ourselves to that going forward. We wanted to really find out from a small group what would have value, and create something solid in which to invite more people. So I think that's just a starting place, Jim.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing to do for sure. You don't need any permission to start those. You can just do those in your area. If you need some help, I will get on the phone with you and help walk you through what we've learned about those. But good opportunities to do that as well. Julie, we have been around the horn and have covered a whole bunch of topics on this. I hope helpful for people listening. I know helpful for people listening. Anything else that I didn't ask or that you wanted to say before we kind of wrap this thing up?
I can't think of a thing, Jim, other than I wanted to give a shout out to Curtis Grubb, who is the magic behind the scenes and makes all this technology work. Thank you, Curtis. He helped me out yesterday.
Curtis is a great guy. If, like Roy, a lot of folks, Roy French, who's my video editor, who's behind the scenes, makes us look good. Roy will actually fix the audio that we're having on this today. So if you're listening to the recorded version, you're like, what audio problems? I didn't hear anything. That's because Roy does a great job of fixing it. But Curtis does all my pre-work. So anytime we're having somebody on Call to Coach, talk about soaring with your strengths. That's one of those areas where Curtis is really good and professional and just puts people at ease. I don't want you coming to the program all stressed out, all worried about how this is going to work. And so Curtis is magical at that. I will certainly pass that on to him as well.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, Julie, great to have you on. It's been great. He said you would be super, and you were indeed super. And so I want to thank you for your time that we had this morning to be able to do it, or this afternoon or this evening, depending on what time zone you're listening in. Want to thank you for doing that. I wasn't able to spend as much time in the chat room today as I normally do. When I have a host, I can do that easily today, but I wanted to spend some time talking to Julie today. And so we want to thank those that came out and listened live as well. So Julie, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
All right.
Hang tight for 1 second, and we'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. You can send us your questions or comments if you'd like to be a guest blogger. If you have something to say and you want to write that down, we look for 400 to 600 words in a blog. You can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line. We are looking for original content, so if you've posted it already, we'll ask you to rewrite something more original, but if you'd like to help us with the blog, that'd be great. If you want to catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as all the past ones we have available, I was telling Julie earlier, I think in all the podcasting I've done maybe 1,000 of these things. We have about 300 of them available right off our Gallup page. So if you head over to coaching.gallup.com and look in the blog, everything is there. We have a topic section where you can click on that and drill down. All kinds of great resources available for you there if you want to head out. Coaching.gallup.com. We talked about becoming a Gallup-Certified Strengths coach. If you're interested in doing that or have some questions around it, head out to our courses page. You can get information out there, courses.gallup.com. There's a contact form right there on the live page. You want to fill that out and submit it. Somebody will call you back. Don't forget to join us on our Facebook group. We have a Gallup Webcasts Facebook group. You can find us there. Actually, just go to facebook.com/groups/called2coach. We started that group with just one webcast, and now we have a bunch. But you can find our Facebook group there. Over 10,000 people in that group now. We'd love to have you engage in the conversation and get access to all the things that we're doing on our webcast channel as well. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you'd share it. Actually, really, really important that you would share these webcasts with others. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say, goodbye, everybody.